I think as women, you've got to find your place and what you want to do and what you want to be. And it can't always be a giving thing. Maybe it's a learning.
Dan and Joyce Hardin are mission heroes in my book.
Well, we had gone to church in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had just moved there with my family. And as we sat there, I watched a young man walk his mother up the aisle. And I thought to myself, I'm going to have a relationship with him. Now, I didn't know if it was be a good one or not. The first real date we had, we were going to go to a movie. But kind of before we got to the main road, he told me that he was going to be a missionary and go to Korea. And I kind of got the impression that if I wasn't really interested in going to the mission field, maybe just tell him then and he'd just take me home. But I wanted to see the movie, so stayed in the car and ended up with 17 years in Korea.
The Crystal Globe Award is to recognize how God works through individuals and through families, and to honor their contribution, how God has used them to contribute to missions around the globe, to missions among churches of Christ.
We arrived in 58, so the war had just been over in Korea just a few years. Of course, had in my mind a much worse place than it ever turned out to be. The military men told me there were no trees and that everything was wet and muddy. The first thing I saw when I arrived in Korea was a tree. And I thought, well, maybe if that's not true, the other things are not true either. And they told me it was a country without color, and I saw color everywhere.
You know, one of the things Joyce did was controversial, and she and Dan decided that their girls would go to a Korean school, which said, we think you are good people, you're worthwhile, we respect you.
One of probably the best decision we ever made in our lives.
And the Koreans still remember that.
The Korea Christian University was begun about 3 months before we got to Korea in April, and so we both taught. First class I taught, I said, I'm never going to do it again. And I remember one time saying something about wishing that I had older women that would guide me, and my husband said, you're going to be that woman for other people.
We think it's important that we select a woman and honor her for her work, because anytime a team goes, it's not just the men who are out there doing Bible studies. It's not just the men who are leading people to Christ. It's not just the men who are discipling new converts. It's not the men who are carrying the church. Their wives are just as engaged, and not just in a support role, in a frontline role.
I think watching a school grow and develop, I think watching a country come out of the ashes to be a leader in the world, it's just awesome to have been part of that. We worked with congregations that often began in our home and then moved to buildings, but primarily with Korea Christian University.
She has continued to be focused on missions her whole life.
They asked Dan to come and start a missions department at Lubbock Christian, and I would teach in the education department.
They made it their aim to keep enriching their training.
Being a woman in the 70s and the 80s, it was different. Women were just beginning to push at that glass ceiling a little bit, and after a number of years, I actually became Associate Academic Dean, and then became the first woman dean of the College of Education at Lubbock Christian University.
Whether she has been, at LCU or wherever she's been, she served on missions committees. She has been a support to missions. She's been involved in missionary care. She's written curriculum for churches to use in their elementary education programs, even after losing her husband.
I want to do things. I'm not, and I had a husband that encouraged that. He was just always there saying, you can do this, and allowing me to step forward. I think I'm pretty much a leader. Dan was kind of a Renaissance man, some people say. He was a magician, a carpenter, a locksmith, an artist. I've been a magician's assistant, an artist model, you name it. Well, it was Dan and Joyce and Dan, and it's hard just to be Joyce. He died 1 year short of our 50th anniversary.
It's inspirational to just sit and listen to her talk about her life and her experience, and she's written about it extensively.
Before I ever met her, I read her book about women and our place in the mission field. This is a woman who respects women and their ability to do things.
Joyce continues to work in Korea from a distance to be able to help the churches grow and training institutes there.
She has children who have gone into the mission field. She's been an inspiration to others.
Well, actually, what my husband would say, we made all the mistakes. That's the reason we wrote the books. For me, working with teachers has just been a real exciting part of my life. And I am very humbled and awed by receiving the Crystal Globe Award. I think women have made such a contribution in countries all over the world, and we don't often recognize that. We'll often say the man's name, but not the woman's name, and I'm glad to represent that.